In the heart of Naples, Italy, where the ancient cobblestones whispered tales of forgotten eras, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the salty air of the sea, lived Maria. She was a young woman, barely 18, her hands already bearing the telltale signs of a life spent in tireless labor. Her home was a small, run-down apartment, its walls scarred by time and neglect, much like the lives of those who inhabited it. Every morning, before the first rays of sun kissed the Bay of Naples, Maria was already awake, her slender frame moving with a quiet determination. She toiled relentlessly, juggling a myriad of odd jobs, scrubbing floors in bustling trattorias, mending clothes for demanding neighbors, and carrying heavy baskets of laundry up never-ending flights of stairs. Each meager earning was carefully hoarded, a lifeline for her and her ailing mother, Elena. Elena, a woman whose once vibrant spirit had been dimmed by an unseen torment, was gravely ill. Her days were punctuated by fits of racking coughs, each one a stark reminder of the expensive medicines she desperately needed. Maria watched her mother fade a little more with each passing day, a knot of desperation tightening in her stomach. The weight of their existence, the constant struggle against poverty and illness, pressed down on Maria's young shoulders, forcing her to mature far beyond her years. She was a silent warrior, her love for her mother a fierce, unyielding flame that fueled her every action. One sweltering afternoon, as Maria returned from another exhausting shift, she heard hushed voices drifting from their apartment. It was her mother, her voice strained and thin, speaking to their elderly neighbor, Signora Bianchi. The words that filtered through the thin door sent a chill down Maria's spine. Elena was speaking of a debt, a massive ancient burden that had weighed on her for years. It was owed to a dangerous man, a local figure known only as Mr. Rossi. The debt, Maria pieced together from the fragmented conversation, stemmed from something that had happened long ago, a desperate loan Elena had taken to cover complications during Maria's own birth. A cold dread seeped into Maria's bones. She had always known their poverty was deep, but this was something far more menacing. As if summoned by their very thoughts, a shadow fell across their doorway just a few days later. Mr. Rossi, a man whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud, stood there. He was a gruff, intimidating figure, his eyes cold and devoid of warmth, his expensive suit doing little to soften his menacing aura. He was a loan shark, whispered to have deep, unsavory connections to the local Mafia, a man no one dared cross. He didn't bother with pleasantries. His voice, a low growl, cut through the oppressive heat. "The debt is due, Elena. Today." Elena, frail and trembling, began to weep, her hands clasped together in a desperate plea. "I have nothing, Mr. Rossi, nothing left to give." Rossi's gaze, however, was not on Elena. It drifted, assessing and unnervingly calculating, to Maria, who stood frozen in the doorway, a silent sentinel of fear. A chilling smile, devoid of any genuine amusement, spread across Rossi's lips. "Perhaps there is another solution," he drawled, his eyes still fixed on Maria. "A powerful man, a boss, is in need of a new servant. Someone young, strong, willing to work. She could pay off your debt." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. He made it clear, without uttering another syllable, that refusal was not an option. Maria's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She looked at her mother, whose face was a mask of despair, tears streaming down her hollowed cheeks. The thought of Elena, alone and vulnerable, at the mercy of men like Rossi, was unbearable. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Maria stepped forward. Her voice, though trembling slightly, was firm. "I'll go," she stated, the words a bitter taste in her mouth. Elena gasped, collapsing onto a nearby chair, her sobs racking her entire body. "My daughter," she choked out. "I'm so sorry, my sweet girl." Maria knelt beside her, embracing her mother tightly, trying to convey a strength she herself didn't feel. "I'll be strong, Mama," she whispered, her own eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I promise to come back for you." It was a vow made in desperation, a fragile promise against a terrifying unknown. Rossi, satisfied, gave a curt nod. He wasted no time. Within moments, Maria found herself being ushered into the back of a sleek black car, its tinted windows obscuring the familiar streets of Naples. As the vehicle pulled away, leaving her mother and their crumbling apartment behind, Maria pressed her face against the cold glass, a profound sense of loss and fear washing over her. The car sped out of the city, the urban landscape gradually giving way to rolling hills and sprawling estates. Eventually, they pulled up to a grand, imposing villa, its stone facade dark and menacing against the setting sun. A knot tightened in Maria's stomach. She was scared, more scared than she had ever been in her life. But beneath the fear, a flicker of fierce determination remained. She had made a promise, and she would keep it. She had no idea what awaited her within those formidable walls, nor the secrets that lay buried beneath its opulent exterior. All she knew was that she had to be strong, for her mother, and for whatever future lay ahead. The imposing villa, a silent sentinel against the darkening sky, loomed before Maria, a stark contrast to the humble life she had always known. But as the car door closed behind her, sealing her fate, her mind drifted, not to the opulent prison she was about to enter, but to the woman who had brought her into this world, Elena. For Elena carried secrets, burdens far heavier than any debt, secrets that had shaped Maria's destiny long before she was even born. 20 years prior, Elena was a different woman. Her eyes, now clouded with sorrow and illness, once sparkled with an innocent joy. Her spirit, now bowed by hardship, was then light and free, a testament to her simple, kind nature. She was a flower in the vibrant tapestry of Naples, a woman unburdened by the complexities that would later define her life. Her heart, pure and open, was captured by a man named Giovanni, a whirlwind of charisma and passion. He was everything Elena dreamed of: charming, attentive, and fiercely protective. He moved with an air of quiet power, a magnetism that drew people to him, and Elena was no exception. Their love story, to her, was a fairy tale unfolding against the backdrop of the sun-drenched Italian coast. But Giovanni held a secret, a dark shadow that clung to him like a second skin. He was not merely a charismatic man. He was a rising figure in the local mafia, a world of intricate loyalties, brutal power struggles, and unforgiving consequences. He shielded Elena from this truth, weaving a careful facade of legitimate business and urgent, undisclosed commitments. His absences were frequent, his explanations vague. Yet Elena, blinded by love and trust, never questioned him. She saw only the man who adored her, the man who promised her a future filled with love and security. Their love blossomed, and soon, a new life stirred within Elena. She was pregnant with Maria, and Giovanni, despite the inherent dangers of his world, was overjoyed. A child, a legacy, a symbol of their love. It was a prospect that thrilled him, even as a creeping worry gnawed at the edges of his mind. How could a child, so innocent and fragile, fit into the brutal reality of his existence? He vowed to protect them both, to build a fortress around his family, shielding them from the darkness he navigated daily. Unbeknownst to Elena, Giovanni's family, the powerful Morettis, were locked in a bitter centuries-old feud with another formidable Mafia clan, the Falcones. The streets of Naples, though seemingly peaceful, often simmered with unspoken tensions, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Giovanni, a key player in this dangerous game, was always on edge, always anticipating the next move from his rivals. One fateful night, the fragile peace shattered. Giovanni was away, tending to business, a euphemism for the dangerous dealings that consumed his life. The Falcones, seizing their opportunity, launched a brutal, coordinated attack on the Moretti estate. It was a scene of unimaginable chaos and violence. Gunshots echoing through the night, flames licking at ancient stone, the screams of the innocent mingling with the shouts of hardened men. Elena, heavily pregnant and utterly terrified, found herself caught in the terrifying crossfire. She was no warrior, merely a woman desperate to protect the life growing inside her. In the ensuing pandemonium, Elena tried desperately to escape. She stumbled, fell, and sustained a painful injury, a deep cut on her arm that bled profusely. She was separated from Giovanni, lost in the maelstrom of destruction. She called his name, her voice hoarse with fear, but received no answer. As the estate burned around her, she was told by a frantic, loyal servant that Giovanni had been killed, cut down in the heart of the battle. Her world crumbled. With the help of the same servant, a kind-hearted woman named Sophia who risked her own life, Elena managed to flee the burning estate. Barely escaping with her life, her heart shattered, believing her beloved Giovanni was gone forever. Days later, in a secluded, hidden safe house far from the ravaged estate, Elena gave birth to Maria prematurely. The pain of childbirth mingled with the searing grief of loss, a bittersweet arrival in a world suddenly devoid of hope. As Sophia cleaned the fragile newborn, Elena's eyes, still swollen from tears, fell upon her daughter's tiny left shoulder blade. There, stark against the newborn's delicate skin, was a distinctive, flower-shaped birthmark. A gasp escaped Elena's lips. It was unmistakable. This unique marking, a delicate swirl of darker pigment, was a cherished family trait, passed down through generations of Giovanni's mother's lineage. Elena had seen it in old photographs, heard stories about its significance. Maria was truly Giovanni's daughter. The realization brought a fresh wave of despair. Giovanni was dead, or so she believed, and now she held his daughter, a living testament to their love, but also a potential target. The Falcones would undoubtedly seek to eradicate any lingering trace of the Moretti line. Elena, heartbroken and terrified, made a desperate decision. She would disappear. She would sever all ties to her past, to the dangerous world of the Morettis and Falcones. She would protect her daughter at all costs, even if it meant erasing Giovanni from their lives entirely. She moved to Naples, a city large enough to swallow a person whole, a place where she could blend into the anonymity of the impoverished masses. She changed her name slightly, shedding her former identity like an old skin. She lived a quiet, solitary life, her days consumed by the struggle for survival, her nights haunted by memories of a love lost and a life stolen. She never spoke of Giovanni, never mentioned his name to Maria. The truth of Maria's father, of her true lineage, was buried deep within Elena's heart, a secret she carried with the weight of a monumental burden, all in the desperate hope of keeping her daughter safe. For 20 long years, Elena lived with this lie. this profound sacrifice, believing it was the only way to shield Maria from a world that had already taken so much from them. And now, that carefully constructed wall of secrecy was about to crumble. The sleek black car, a symbol of her new, terrifying reality, glided silently through the imposing gates of the villa. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of her fear. The villa itself was a behemoth of stone and wrought iron, a fortress that seemed to swallow the very light. Its opulence was undeniable, every carved detail, every polished surface screaming wealth. Yet there was a coldness to it, an intimidating grandeur that offered no comfort. This was not a home. It was an institution, a place of power, and Maria, a pawn in a game she barely understood, was now a part of its intricate machinery. She was immediately ushered into the bustling world of the household staff, a labyrinth of back staircases, echoing corridors, and hidden pantries. Her role was simple, yet all-encompassing: general servant. She was to clean, to cook, to serve, to exist as a silent, efficient shadow within these walls. The work was endless, a relentless cycle that began before dawn and often stretched late into the night. Her hands, already calloused from years of toil, now ached with a new intensity from scrubbing marble floors, polishing silver, and carrying heavy trays of exotic foods she could only dream of tasting. Every muscle in her body protested, but Maria pushed through the pain, her mother's tear-streaked face a constant, burning image in her mind. This was for Elena. This was her sacrifice. It wasn't long before she met the man at the apex of this formidable household, the one they called Mr. Conti. He was the boss, the patriarch, a figure of immense power and quiet dread. In his mid-40s to early 50s, Mr. Conti was a man carved from granite, his features sharp, his eyes a piercing gaze that seemed to miss nothing. He was stern, almost perpetually so, his face rarely softening into a smile. His presence alone was enough to command silence, to instill a tremor of fear in even the most seasoned staff members. Maria was, quite simply, terrified of him. She tried to make herself invisible whenever he was near, to melt into the background, a mere flicker in his peripheral vision. The other servants were a mixed bag. Some, like the elderly housekeeper, Signora Anna, offered a gruff kindness, a knowing glance that spoke of shared hardship. Others were wary, their faces etched with years of subservience, their eyes holding a silent warning against drawing unwanted attention. A few were openly bitter, their resentment simmering beneath forced smiles, their whispers a constant undercurrent of gossip and complaint. Maria learned quickly the unwritten rules of the house. Be seen but not heard. Anticipate needs before they were voiced, and never, ever cross Mr. Conti. Despite the harsh conditions, the relentless labor, and the ever-present fear, Maria clung to her resolve. She missed her mother terribly, a deep, aching void in her heart that no amount of work could fill. When she could snatch a moment, usually late at night, hidden in the dim light of the servants' quarters, she would write letters. They were simple, heartfelt notes, filled with reassurances that she was well, that she was strong, that she was earning money for their future. She never mentioned the villa's grandeur, nor the fear it inspired. She only spoke of hope, a fragile shield against the truth. She entrusted these letters to Signora Anna, who, with a knowing nod, would somehow ensure their delivery. Occasionally, Maria would catch Mr. Conti's gaze upon her. It was never prolonged, never direct, but she felt the weight of his observation. He was a stoic man, his expressions unreadable. Yet there was a flicker, a fleeting moment of something she couldn't quite decipher, in his eyes when he watched her. It was usually when she was performing some mundane task, scrubbing a floor, or carefully arranging flowers. He seemed to notice her diligence, her quiet resilience, the way she moved with a quiet determination despite her obvious exhaustion. She even noticed him once, from a distance, watching her gently repot a neglected plant in the solarium, a small act of kindness she had undertaken in a desperate attempt to find a sliver of beauty amidst the stark reality of her days. He had simply observed, then turned and walked away, leaving Maria to wonder what, if anything, had registered behind his unyielding facade. Maria found small joys where she could. The neglected plant in the garden, which she secretly watered and nurtured, slowly began to thrive under her care, its tender new leaves a symbol of hope. The occasional kind word from a fellow servant, a shared knowing glance, a brief moment of camaraderie. These were the small mercies that sustained her. She focused on her work, on the promise she had made to Elena, allowing her determination to be a shield against the crushing weight of her circumstances. One afternoon, a sharp, sickening crash echoed through the otherwise silent grand hall. Maria, her hands trembling, stared in horror at the shattered remnants of an ornate, impossibly expensive vase, now lying in 1,000 glittering pieces on the polished marble floor. Her heart leaped into her throat. This was it. This was the moment she had dreaded, the inevitable mistake that would seal her fate. Visions of Mr. Rossi, of her mother's desperate pleas, flashed before her eyes. She was paralyzed by fear, her mind racing with imagined punishments. Just then, as if on cue, a shadow fell over her. Mr. Conti stood there, tall and imposing, his eyes fixed first on the shattered vase, then on Maria's pale, frightened face. Maria braced herself for the inevitable tirade. The cutting words, the furious anger she had witnessed directed at other servants for far lesser offenses. But it didn't come. He simply stood there, his expression unreadable, for what felt like an eternity. Then, in a voice that was surprisingly calm, devoid of any trace of anger or accusation, he spoke. "Clean it up carefully, Maria. Don't cut yourself." He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Maria bewildered and utterly stunned. The cold, unyielding boss, the man who instilled fear with a mere glance, had shown a flicker of something akin to understanding, perhaps even a hint of concern. It was a small act, a quiet moment, but it profoundly shook Maria, leaving her to ponder the complexities of the man she served. Later that week, as Maria was meticulously cleaning the ornate banister that snaked up the grand staircase, she noticed something peculiar about Mr. Conti. He was speaking to a stern-looking man in a dark suit, his hand resting on the banister directly above hers. As he gestured, his sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a faint, thin scar on his left hand, near his thumb. It looked old, a white line against his tanned skin. Maria didn't think much of it, merely a passing observation, another detail in the vast, intimidating tapestry of the villa and its mysterious owner. She continued her work, unaware that this seemingly insignificant detail, combined with her own hidden mark, would soon unravel a truth more profound and life-altering than she could possibly imagine. The villa, usually a place of quiet, disciplined routine, now thrummed with a nervous energy. Preparations for the upcoming social event had begun, transforming the grand house into a beehive of activity. Maria's already demanding schedule intensified dramatically. The major social event as the other servants whispered, was not just any gathering. It was a convergence of powerful, intimidating figures, men and women whose very presence seemed to weigh down the air. Every corner of the sprawling estate had to be immaculate, every detail perfect. Maria found herself working longer hours, her body aching with a fatigue she hadn't known even in her most desperate days in Naples. She polished silver until her reflection gleamed back, scrubbed floors until they shone like mirrors, and arranged flowers in vases so tall they dwarfed her. The pressure was immense. The stakes, she implicitly understood, were incredibly high. One afternoon, amidst the frantic flurry of activity, Maria was tasked with carrying a heavy tray, laden with delicate porcelain dishes and platters of elaborate appetizers from the kitchen to the grand dining room. The tray, an antique piece of solid silver, felt impossibly heavy in her tired arms, its weight threatening to pull her downwards. Her vision, blurred by exhaustion, struggled to navigate the bustling corridors. She was almost there, just a few more steps, when disaster struck. A loose rug, an unexpected wrinkle in the otherwise pristine carpet, snaked beneath her worn shoe. Her foot caught, her balance wavered, and in a sickening moment of slow-motion horror, the tray tilted. A sharp cry escaped her lips as she stumbled, trying desperately to regain her footing. It was too late. The heavy tray clattered violently, dishes flying, food splattering across the polished marble floor in a chaotic explosion of color and sound. The delicate porcelain shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, their sharp edges glinting maliciously under the chandeliers. Maria landed hard on her knees, the impact sending a jolt of pain through her tired body. The broken shards of porcelain, unforgiving and sharp, dug into her left arm as she fell, tearing through the thin fabric of her uniform sleeve. A searing pain shot up her arm, and she could feel the warm, sticky flow of blood almost immediately. Her breath hitched in her throat, not from the pain, but from a fresh wave of terror. The broken vase incident had been bad enough, but this was far worse. The sheer volume of destruction, the valuable items ruined, the mess. She scrambled to her feet, her mind racing, a desperate plea forming on her lips, but no words came out. Just then, a presence, a shift in the air, a sudden chilling silence that descended upon the corridor. Maria slowly looked up, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Mr. Conti stood there, in the archway of the dining room, his figure silhouetted against the opulent interior. He had walked into the room just as the accident happened, a silent, imposing witness to her catastrophic mistake. His eyes, usually so impassive, now seemed to bore into her. He saw Maria, on the floor moments before, now scrambling to her feet, her uniform splattered with food, her left arm bleeding, her sleeve torn and hanging in ribbons. As Maria tried to compose herself, her hand instinctively going to her injured arm, the torn sleeve slid further down, exposing her shoulder blade. The fabric, already shredded by the sharp porcelain, peeled back, revealing the smooth skin beneath, and there it was, stark against her skin, clear and unmistakable, the distinctive flower-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder blade. It was a delicate swirl of darker pigment, intricate and unique, standing out against her pale skin like a secret tattoo. Mr. Conti stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes, which had initially registered the mess and Maria's distress, now fixed on the birthmark with an intensity that sent a fresh shiver of fear down Maria's spine. His face, usually a mask of stern composure, went pale, almost ashen. The cold, unyielding facade he always presented shattered, dissolving into an expression Maria had never seen before, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something akin to profound recognition. He stared at the mark, his gaze unwavering, as if he were seeing a ghost or a long-lost memory suddenly brought to life. The air in the corridor grew thick with unspoken tension, the shattered dishes and spilled food forgotten in the sudden, inexplicable shift in the atmosphere. Maria, her arm throbbing, felt a prickle of unease. His reaction was terrifying, far more unnerving than any anger he could have shown. She felt exposed, vulnerable, under his intense scrutiny. She didn't understand. Had she somehow offended him? Was the birthmark itself a transgression? He took a step closer, his eyes still riveted on her shoulder. He opened his mouth, and when he spoke, his voice was not the usual commanding baritone she knew. It was quiet, strained, almost a whisper, raw, with an emotion she couldn't label. "Where did you get that mark?" he asked, the words barely audible. Maria was confused and scared. Her mind raced, trying to find an explanation for his strange question. "It's always been there," she replied, her voice small and trembling, her eyes darting nervously between his pale face and her exposed shoulder. "Since I was born." Mr. Conti didn't respond immediately. He just continued to stare, his jaw tight, his eyes wide with an unreadable emotion. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he visibly recoiled. He turned abruptly, his movements stiff and jerky, and walked away quickly, without another word, without a glance back at the shattered dishes or Maria's injured arm. He simply retreated, disappearing down the corridor and leaving Maria bewildered and deeply worried. The other servants, who had frozen at the sound of the crash and Mr. Conti's sudden appearance, now began to stir. Whispers erupted, hushed and curious, as they exchanged bewildered glances. They had all witnessed Mr. Conti's strange reaction, his abrupt departure, and the intensity of his gaze on Maria. No one understood what had just transpired. Maria, left alone amidst the wreckage, felt a profound sense of dread settle over her. Her arm ached, but the pain was secondary to the gnawing fear in her gut. She thought she had done something terribly wrong, something far worse than breaking dishes, or perhaps, she mused, her heart sinking, Mr. Conti was angry about the birthmark itself for some unknown, sinister reason. His reaction had been so visceral, so unlike him. She didn't understand, but she knew, with a chilling certainty, that her life in the villa, and perhaps her very future, had just taken an unforeseen and terrifying turn. The quiet, unyielding boss, the man she feared, now held a new, inexplicable power over her, a power born from a mark she had carried since birth. After witnessing the birthmark, a tremor ran through Mr. Conti, shaking him to his very core. He retreated to the cold solitude of his private study, the echoes of shattered porcelain and Maria's trembling voice fading behind him. The room, usually a sanctuary of controlled power, now felt like a cage. He moved with a frantic urgency, his hands fumbling through a hidden compartment in his desk. From its depths, he pulled out a collection of old, faded photographs and yellowed documents, treasures he had guarded fiercely, yet rarely dared to look at. His eyes, still wide with a shock that bordered on terror, scanned a particular photograph, a sepia-toned image of a young woman, his mother, her smile gentle, her shoulder bared just enough to reveal a faint, yet unmistakable, flower-shaped birthmark. He then picked up a baby picture, a tiny, swaddled infant, his own lost daughter, taken just days after her birth. Though the image was small and slightly blurred, he could almost imagine the same delicate mark on her tender skin. The resemblance, the undeniable pattern, sent a jolt of recognition and a wave of profound sorrow through him. His mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions: disbelief, a nascent hope, and a crushing weight of guilt. He had to know. He had to be certain. With trembling fingers, he picked up the secure satellite phone, a device reserved for only the most critical and sensitive communications. He made a series of urgent, hushed phone calls, his voice low and strained, barely above a whisper. Each call was brief, precise, and laced with an unspoken urgency that conveyed the gravity of his situation to the recipients. He contacted an old, trusted family associate, a man whose loyalty had been forged in the crucible of their shared past, a former doctor who had discreetly handled many sensitive family matters over the decades. He explained the situation in veiled terms, emphasizing the absolute need for discretion and haste. Within hours, the doctor arrived at the villa. His presence explained away to the staff as a routine health checkup, a convenient cover for his true purpose. He was a man of quiet efficiency, his eyes sharp and discerning. He was led directly to Maria, who was still recovering from her fall, her arm bandaged, her mind still reeling from Mr. Conti's bizarre reaction. The doctor, under the guise of examining her injury, discreetly examined the birthmark on her shoulder blade. His practiced eyes confirmed its unique pattern, its intricate, almost artistic swirl. He asked a few innocuous questions, his demeanor calm and reassuring, but his focus was entirely on the mark. Then, with a subtlety born of years of clandestine practice, he managed to take a small, discreet blood sample, a tiny vial of her life force, the key to unlocking the truth. As the blood sample was rushed away for immediate DNA testing, Mr. Conti, now known to himself as Giovanni Moretti, found himself trapped in an agonizing wait. The hours stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying his internal turmoil. He was plagued by vivid, haunting flashbacks of that fateful night 2 decades ago. The chaos, the inferno that consumed his estate, the deafening roar of gunfire, the desperate, futile search for Elena, his beloved wife, and their newborn baby. He remembered the despair, the soul-crushing agony when he was finally told they were both dead, lost to the flames in the Falcone family's ruthless attack. He had buried his grief deep, transforming himself into the formidable Mr. Conti, building an impenetrable fortress around his heart, believing he had lost everything that mattered. Now, the possibility that his daughter, his own flesh and blood, could be alive, could be here, under his very roof, was almost unbearable. He became withdrawn and distant, his usual stern demeanor replaced by a haunted, preoccupied air that unnerved the entire household. The servants whispered amongst themselves, speculating about the cause of their boss's sudden, profound change. Finally, the call came. The results were back. Giovanni's hand trembled as he answered, his heart hammering against his ribs. The voice on the other end was professional, dispassionate, but the words it delivered hit him with the force of a physical blow. It was a match. Maria was his biological daughter. His mind reeled, overwhelmed with a torrent of emotions he had suppressed for 20 years. Shock, a profound aching grief for the lost years, and a fierce protective joy he thought he would never feel again. His daughter was alive. His daughter was here. His next thought was immediate and searing. How had she come to be here? He immediately launched an investigation, his network of associates moving with ruthless efficiency. It didn't take long. He discovered Elena's crippling debt to Mr. Rossi, the local loan shark, and the unspeakable transaction that had brought Maria to his villa. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Rossi had exploited Maria's mother, had taken advantage of their desperation, and then, in a cruel twist of fate, had delivered his own daughter into his hands as a servant. A cold, terrifying fury began to simmer within Giovanni. Rossi had not only preyed upon the vulnerable, but he had dared to profit from his family's misfortune, from his daughter's unwitting sacrifice. The thought of Maria, his daughter, working as a servant in his own home, sold into servitude to pay a debt, filled him with a rage so profound it chilled him to the bone. He realized the true depth of Elena's suffering, the impossible choice she must have faced, and the innocent courage Maria had shown in agreeing to such a desperate measure. The man who had once been Giovanni Moretti, and now Mr. Conti, felt a primal instinct awaken within him, an instinct to protect, to avenge, and to reclaim what had been so cruelly taken. Rossi would pay, and he would pay dearly. Giovanni summoned Mr. Rossi to the villa under the pretense of discussing an urgent and lucrative business opportunity. Rossi, ever the opportunist, arrived promptly, his usual swagger amplified by the expectation of an easy profit. He was ushered into Giovanni's private study, a room steeped in a silent power that made even seasoned men like Rossi feel a tremor of unease. Rossi entered, a smug smile playing on his lips, anticipating the smooth exchange of money and favors. But the smile faltered, then vanished completely. As he met Giovanni's gaze, there was no casual greeting, no offer of a drink, only Giovanni's cold, hard stare, an intensity that seemed to strip Rossi bare. Giovanni leaned back in his imposing leather chair, his hands clasped, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that filled the silent room. He began, not with pleasantries, but with a chilling precision. He spoke of the debt, Elena's debt, a debt that had been paid, not in coin, but in flesh and blood. He spoke of Maria, his daughter, sold into servitude, delivered to his very doorstep by Rossi's greedy hands. The words were delivered with a calm deadliness that was far more terrifying than any shouted threat. Rossi, initially bewildered, then tried to deny it, a nervous laugh catching in his throat. He stammered, attempting to justify his actions, to paint Maria's arrangement as a benevolent solution to Elena's financial woes. But Giovanni's eyes, burning with an ancient fury, silenced him. There was no room for lies, no space for excuses. Giovanni made it brutally clear that Rossi had not merely collected a debt. He had committed an unforgivable offense against his own daughter, unknowingly, yet irrevocably. The air in the study crackled with an unspoken menace. "The debt," Giovanni finally stated, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible level, "is now owed to me, Mr. Rossi, and the price, I assure you, is far greater than money." He then began to detail Rossi's impending downfall. It was not to be a swift, merciful end, but a slow, agonizing dismantle. Rossi would lose everything: his ill-gotten business, his carefully cultivated connections within the underworld, his protection, his very standing. Every pillar of his existence would be systematically razed to the ground. The words were delivered with the chilling certainty of a prophecy. Rossi, his bravado completely shattered, was left a pale, trembling wreck. He pleaded, he begged, but Giovanni remained unmoved, his judgment absolute. The meeting concluded not with a handshake, but with a silent, terrifying dismissal. True to his word, Giovanni unleashed the full force of his vast influence and intricate network upon Rossi. It was a calculated, surgical strike. Within days, Rossi's operations began to crumble. His illegal gambling dens were raided, his smuggling routes intercepted, his loan sharking network exposed. Information, carefully withheld for years, suddenly found its way into the hands of the authorities, leading to arrests and confiscations. Rossi's once loyal associates, sensing the shift in power, quickly turned on him, eager to curry favor with the formidable Giovanni Moretti. They saw the writing on the wall. Rossi was finished. His empire, built on fear and exploitation, imploded with shocking speed, leaving him ruined, exposed, and utterly alone, a stark warning to anyone who dared to cross the Moretti family. While Rossi's world disintegrated, Giovanni also turned his attention to Elena's original debt. He ordered a thorough investigation into the specifics of the loan. His findings confirmed that while the initial loan had been legitimate, Rossi's methods of interest accumulation and collection were predatory, designed to entrap the desperate. Giovanni ensured that Elena was completely and legally absolved of any remaining financial obligations, severing all ties to Rossi's nefarious schemes. He wanted her free, truly free, from the burden that had cost her 20 years of peace and her daughter's freedom. Throughout this period of intense retribution, Maria, unaware of the storm raging around Rossi, noticed a subtle yet profound change in Giovanni's demeanor towards her. The stern, distant boss was still present, but beneath the surface there was a new, almost watchful tenderness. He would observe her from afar, his gaze lingering a moment longer than before. Her duties became noticeably lighter, her tasks less physically demanding. She found herself assigned to more pleasant chores, like arranging flowers in the sun-drenched conservatory, or assisting the head cook with lighter preparations. Her meals, once simple and functional, now often included small, thoughtful additions. A perfectly ripe piece of fruit, a portion of a special dessert. These changes were subtle, implemented with a discretion that prevented other servants from noticing any overt favoritism. Yet Maria felt the shift. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted, replaced by a delicate, unspoken care. She couldn't understand why, but the fear that had gripped her after the Birthmark incident slowly began to recede, replaced by a hesitant sense of ease. Yet, even as he ensured Maria's immediate comfort and safety, Giovanni's mind was already racing ahead, anticipating future threats. His investigations into Rossi's connections unearthed fragments of information about the Falcone family, the rival clan believed to be responsible for the attack that had separated him from Elena and Maria 2 decades ago. He realized that while he had mourned them as dead, accepting the narrative of their demise, the full truth of that night might be far more complex, shrouded in layers of deception and misinformation. And if Maria's identity as his daughter were ever to become widely known, it could potentially resurrect old hostilities, making her a target for enemies he thought long vanquished. He had to be vigilant to protect his rediscovered daughter from the lingering shadows of his dangerous past, a past that now threatened to entangle her in its deadly web once more. The battle for justice for Elena and Maria had just begun, and it was far from over. The time had come. Giovanni, now fully embracing his identity as Maria's father, knew he could no longer delay. He needed to tell her the truth, to unravel the decades of silence and secrecy that had shaped both their lives. He sent for Maria, requesting her presence in his private study. As the message reached her, a familiar knot of apprehension tightened in Maria's stomach. Despite the recent, subtle acts of kindness, the study remained an intimidating space, a place of power and solemnity. She feared she had done something wrong, or that the fragile peace she had found was about to be shattered. With a nervous breath, she knocked gently on the heavy oak door. Giovanni, sitting behind his large, imposing desk, gestured for her to sit in the plush armchair opposite him. His face, usually a mask of stoic control, was etched with a rare vulnerability, a mix of anxiety and profound emotion that Maria had never witnessed. He cleared his throat, his gaze distant for a moment, as if gathering the courage for a monumental task. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a single, carefully preserved photograph. He handed it to Maria. Her eyes widened as she took the picture. It was an old, slightly faded photograph, but the faces were unmistakable. A younger version of the stern man before her, his arm around a beautiful, radiant woman, her belly noticeably swollen with pregnancy. Both were smiling, a genuine, unburdened joy radiating from their faces. And the woman. Maria's breath hitched. It was her mother, Elena, younger, healthier, happier than Maria had ever seen her. A wave of confusion, then a dawning comprehension washed over her. Her mother had never spoken of this man, this life. Who was he? And why was he holding a picture of her mother? Giovanni watched her carefully, his heart pounding. "That woman," he began, his voice a little hoarse, "is your mother, Elena. And the man, that is me, Giovanni Moretti." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing her to process the initial shock. He continued, his voice gaining a steady, resolute tone. 20 years ago, Elena and I were married. We were deeply in love, and we were expecting our first child. You, Maria. He went on to recount the story, a narrative of love, betrayal, and devastating loss. He spoke of the dangerous world he inhabited, the bitter rivalry between his family, the Morettis, and the Falcones. He described the night of the attack, the inferno, the chaos, his desperate search for Elena and their unborn child. He recounted the crushing news he received, the reports that they had both perished in the fire, leaving him a broken man, consumed by grief and a thirst for vengeance. He had built the formidable persona of Mr. Conti as a shield, a way to survive the unbearable pain of his past. Then he came to the crucial detail, the catalyst for this unbelievable revelation. "When you fell, Maria, and your sleeve tore, I saw it." His gaze shifted to her left shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the distinctive mark. "The birthmark, it's a unique trait in my family, passed down through generations. My mother had it, and when I saw it on you, it was like a lightning bolt. It was impossible, I thought. They were gone. But that mark, it was too precise, too perfect." He explained how he had discreetly sought confirmation, how the trusted doctor had examined her, and how the DNA test had provided the irrefutable evidence. He placed a sealed envelope on the desk, its contents confirming the biological link. "The results," he said, "confirm what my heart already knew. You are my daughter, Maria." Maria sat in stunned silence, her mind reeling. The man she had feared, the powerful boss who had ruled her life as a servant, was her father. The woman she loved, her ailing mother, had harbored this monumental secret for 2 decades. It was too much to absorb, too many conflicting emotions swirling within her. Disbelief warred with a strange, burgeoning sense of connection. The pieces of her life, once so simple and clear, had suddenly fractured and rearranged themselves into an entirely new, complex mosaic. The poverty, her mother's mysterious illness, the desperate debt. It all suddenly made a terrifying, heartbreaking sense. Giovanni, seeing her shock, reached across the desk, his hand resting gently on hers. "Maria," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so deeply sorry. Sorry for the life you and your mother were forced to endure. Sorry for not finding you sooner. for the years lost, the pain you suffered. I believed you were gone. If I had known, not a single day would have passed without me searching for you." His eyes, usually so cold, now held a deep, profound regret. He assured her, with a conviction that resonated deep within her, that he would make things right, that he would protect her and Elena, and that their future would be one free from fear and hardship. The next step was perhaps the most delicate: the reunion with Elena. Giovanni understood the sensitivity of the situation, the decades of fear and secrecy that had shaped Elena's life. He arranged for a discreet and safe meeting, far from the prying eyes of the villa. Maria was taken to a secluded, comfortable home, where Elena was already waiting. The moment Elena saw Maria, her face crumpled, and she rushed forward, embracing her daughter in a tearful, desperate hug. The explanations flowed, interspersed with sobs and apologies. Elena, her voice trembling, recounted her version of that fateful night, her escape, her belief that Giovanni was dead, and her desperate need to protect Maria from the dangerous world of the Moretti family. She explained why she had kept the birthmark a secret, why she had never spoken of Giovanni. She feared that any connection to his world would put Maria's life in peril. She had chosen a life of poverty and anonymity as the only way to safeguard her daughter. Maria, now armed with the full truth, understood the impossible choice her mother had faced, the immense sacrifice she had made. The reunion was an emotional torrent, a release of 20 years of pent-up grief, love, and unspoken truths. Maria found herself at a crossroads. She loved her mother with all her heart, but she also felt an undeniable, nascent connection to this powerful man who was her father. The man who had been a shadowy figure of fear was now a source of unexpected comfort and protection. She had to decide how to navigate this new, bewildering reality, how to reconcile the past with the present, and how to forge a future that honored both the mother who had sacrificed everything and the father who had unknowingly lost her. Giovanni, observing the emotional reunion, renewed his promise. He would protect both Maria and Elena, ensuring their safety and well-being. He offered them a life free from poverty and fear, a life of comfort and security they had never known. But he was also honest about the inherent dangers that came with his world, the constant vigilance required. He acknowledged that his past, his very identity, was inextricably linked to threats and rivalries. He wasn't offering a fairy tale, but a new, secure reality, albeit one with its own complexities. The three of them, a family fractured and then miraculously reassembled, stood on the precipice of a new beginning, ready to face the uncertain future together. Months later, the echoes of that tearful reunion had settled into a rhythm of quiet, rebuilding lives. Maria and Elena now resided in a beautiful, secluded home nestled in the hills overlooking the bay, a sanctuary provided by Giovanni. It was a stark contrast to their cramped, rundown apartment in Naples. Elena's health, once a constant source of worry, had improved dramatically with proper medical care and a life free from the grinding stress of poverty. Her cough was gone, replaced by a renewed vitality, a sparkle in her eyes that Maria hadn't seen since childhood. She spent her days tending a small, vibrant garden, her hands, once calloused from endless toil, now finding joy in nurturing life. Maria, too, had undergone a profound transformation. She was no longer the weary servant, her days dictated by the demands of others. Instead, she was enrolled in a prestigious local university, pursuing her dreams of studying literature, a passion she had secretly harbored but never dared to voice. Her days were filled with books, lectures, and the quiet thrill of intellectual discovery. Giovanni, her father, ensured her safety and well-being, providing a dedicated driver and security detail that, while initially unsettling, became a familiar and reassuring presence. He was a loving, protective father, albeit one whose love manifested in a unique blend of stern authority and unwavering support. He spent time with Maria, not just inquiring about her studies, but engaging in thoughtful conversations, sharing insights from his vast experience, and teaching her about the complexities of the world. He was patient, answering her endless questions about his past, his business, and the enigmatic world he commanded. The relationship between Giovanni and Elena was slowly, tentatively rebuilding. There was no pretense of rekindling a lost romance, but a profound respect and a shared devotion to Maria formed the new foundation of their bond. They communicated frequently, discussing Maria's progress, her hopes, and her future. Elena, still wary of Giovanni's world, found solace in his unwavering commitment to their daughter's safety and happiness. She saw the genuine love in his eyes when he looked at Maria, and that was enough. They were a family, albeit an unconventional one, bound by shared history and a fierce protective love for the young woman who was their common ground. Despite the newfound comfort and security, Maria was acutely aware of the lingering shadow of her father's world. The opulent home, the discreet security, the hushed conversations Giovanni sometimes had on his phone. These were constant reminders that her life was far from normal. She saw the guards at the gates, the reinforced windows, and understood that these were not mere luxuries, but necessities, a testament to the risks that still surrounded her father. She had learned enough to know that his power came with inherent dangers, that the peace they now enjoyed had been hard-won and required constant vigilance. She accepted it, understanding that this was the price of their safety, the backdrop of their new normal. Mr. Rossi, the man who had set this chain of events in motion, was now a distant, pathetic memory. Giovanni had been true to his word. Rossi's empire had crumbled, his reputation in tatters, his connections severed. He was a pariah, stripped of his power and wealth, a living warning to anyone who dared to cross Giovanni Moretti. Maria heard whispers of his downfall, but felt no triumph, only a quiet understanding of the immutable justice her father had meted out. Rossi's fate was a stark reminder of the consequences of their world, a world where debts were always paid, one way or another. The Falcone threat, however, was a more insidious, lingering concern. Giovanni had learned that the initial reports of their demise were exaggerated, that remnants of their family still existed, nursing old grievances. He was quietly, meticulously taking steps to neutralize any remaining threats, to ensure Maria's safety. Without her fully realizing the extent of the danger, he deployed his vast network, gathering intelligence, anticipating moves, and subtly dismantling any potential resurgence of the rival clan. Maria was shielded from the specifics, but occasionally she would catch a glimpse of the intensity in her father's eyes, the focused determination, and she knew he was fighting battles she couldn't comprehend, all for her. Maria found an unexpected strength in her new family. She understood the immense sacrifices made by both her parents, the decades of pain and separation that had led them to this moment. She embraced the challenges of her new life, balancing her past experiences with the promising future unfolding before her. She was no longer defined by her humble beginnings as a poor maid's daughter, but by the resilience she had cultivated, the love she had rediscovered, and the opportunities that now stretched before her. She learned to navigate the intricacies of her father's world, understanding its rules and its demands, without losing sight of her own values. Her future was not without its complexities, but Maria faced it with a newfound confidence. She had a powerful, protective father who adored her, a loving mother who had sacrificed everything, and the chance to pursue her passions. She had come full circle, from a life of hardship to one of privilege, but she carried the lessons of her past, the empathy forged in adversity, and the wisdom gained from her incredible journey. With her family by her side, a testament to love and fate, Maria was ready to embark on whatever came next. A young woman forged in fire, now empowered to write her own story,